Hello, Facebook site Spiritism in the Spirit World around us. I'm here with a picture of Allan Kardec's The Spirit's book. Tonight we're talking about actually Leon Denis' book, The Plurality of Lives. Actually, his book is Here and Hereafter, but within the book we're going to talk about what he talked about is the plurality of lives. But first, Allan Kardec, just to give you a quick summary, Allan Kardec is the great codifier of Spiritism. He gave a series of questions, 1,019 questions to mediums throughout France, Europe, asked them the same question, only used the information that they gave back to him if the answers to the questions were similar or the same. Allan Kardec died in 1869, and now we're going to talk about Leon Denis. He was born in 1846, so when Allan Kardec died, he was 23. He's called the Apostle of Spiritism, and he wrote many books. He didn't die until 1927. And let me show you a picture of his book, which I have links to that you can find. Also, you can look that up. Then you look up Leon Denis and then PDF. And you can find his books on PDF. It doesn't cost you anything. Here's Leon Denis, Leon, Leon Denis, Denis, how it's pronounced. It pronounces his name. So a wonderful author. I've read his books on PDF, and I enjoy them immensely. It's very interesting, and and I use a lot of him. You'll notice in my articles and in my books I have written, I use a reference him quite a lot. So he's a very excellent writer. The other thing I like to do before I start, I'd like to also announce that my book that I've just out today, and today is July 17th, 2019. The 7 Tenets of Spiritism is now out on audiobook. So if you would like to go out on to my site and on nwspiritism.com, you will find a link. If you scroll down on the right-hand navigation page, you will find a link to the 7 Tenets of Spiritism, and you'll find links to Amazon paperback book, and then an audio book on 7 Tenets of Spiritism. It's for $6.95 if you would like to hear it on audio. I've had several people ask me, do I have my books in audio yet? This is the first. So if you do use my book and hear it on audio, please leave a review and let me know what you felt. I am also working on my next one, How to Live Inner Peace Through Spiritism. Now, the plurality of lives. So this is very interesting what he says. So let me quote a little bit on how he starts out the plurality of lives. So what he says, what semblance does the mortal life assume, and what in reality is the life of the soul? To answer these questions, we must revert to the problem of life, start at its beginning and follow it through. We know that upon this earth, life first reveals itself in the simplest and most elementary aspects, to rise gradually by constant progression from form to form, from species to species, to the level of the human type, which is the apex of terrestrial creation. Gradually, as the being is developed and refined, sensitivity increases. Slowly, blind instincts make way for intellect and reason. Then he asks this question, does this imply that each individual soul has been obliged to travel the entire length of this terrible road and to ascend every rung of this interminable ladder of progressive evolution, whose foot rests in the darkest of abysses? Before it has been allowed a conscience and freedom, before it has attained to the fullness of its free will, it has necessarily been constrained to sojourn in rudimentary organisms, to assume life's inferior semblances. The study of human nature, which still bears the impress of bestiality, would lead us to believe that such is the case. The question, however, is still open to doubt. Now, I think this is the next important paragraph. It is repugnant to the requirements of justice that a man, even an animal, should live and suffer merely to lend in oblivion. A continuous ascending chain seems to unite all kingdoms, the mineral to the vegetable to the animal, and the latter to man, spiritually as well as materially, for they may be doubly united. These two forms of evolution are parallel and interdependent, life being but a manifestation of the spirit translated into motion. The soul, after a slow elaboration, attains to the human state. There it receives knowledge and can retrograde no more. The forms that it assumes in its different stages are the expressions of its value. The position that it occupies in the change of being is always adequate to its state of advancement. God should not be accused of having produced hideous and malignant creatures. The being can bear no other semblance than that which is the outcome of the habits and tendencies that has been contracted. It may chance that spirits should elect to dwell in debilitated or diseased bodies, the better to correct their passions, to acquire the qualities necessary for their progress. But in a lower state of nature, no choice can be exercised, the creature coming perforce under the dominion of such attractions as it has cultivated in itself. So let's talk about this. So in other religions, it is felt you can reincarnate as animals back and forth. Spiritism tells us you cannot go back. If you are, if you're a human, you can't go back as a dog or a cow. Spiritism doesn't know. You never retrograde, even at the level of spirit. You do not go back. You always move forward. Now, in the book, Spiritism, the Spirits book, I should say, which is by Allan Kardec, there was a question asked about that, and it says, "We don't know." So, how is the spirit created, and how's man created? And they say, "We don't know." And they don't say that, as Leon Denis says, that we start from this very small, logical, maybe mineral, whatever. We go eons and eons as these simple objects. But then there's hints in the books by Chico Xavier, which I should say, the ones that he psychographed, by Andre Luis. There's also more hints in the books by Reverend G. Vaughan, where they say we start out as very simple. So to summarize it for you is what I believe. Now, I have not seen this exactly, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I could be wrong. Is what I believe is we start out as very small units of logic. Now, let me go back a bit when I talk about this. The universe is if you look at the universe, and what we look at it is we look at it solids, right? We look at everything as this, the mic I'm talking to you is solid. The books behind me are solid. My head is solid. It feels real to us, right? But in actuality, everything created, all matter created in our physical universe is all because the will of a spirit, right? That's not to say that creates all of us individually, right? We're all created from nothing. No, it's the earth, the universe, the solar system was created, and then it was guided by the evolution, by the armies of Christ leading our earth. But everything was originally created by the will of high spirits. And then from that process, it could be slightly changed and altered and evolved depending on the will of that high spirit or the other spirits, as Jesus did to the evolution of man. They would change little parts of DNA to create the next evolution of animal. Some was probably natural evolution, but still there was a divine influence in evolution of the human species and other species and animals and vegetables as well. So when I say we're this little bundle of logic, then what I'm saying is we're that little bundle of matter, which is, to us, is not alive. It's just matter, but it's held there. It's held there by the will of a spirit. It has a place. And then as we go on, and maybe we're virus or bacteria, or we become animals, we then that little piece of logic over eons and eons and millennia, just tens of millions of years, I'm sure, will eventually be enough, and we'll be put in enough situations where we will be given the honor of having a free will. And as Leon Denis says, well, So this, this tells us why primitive spirits, and let's talk about primitive spirits for a little bit first. Because he says, right, man is, you can tell the bestiality is in us. And what a primitive spirit. And the Earth used to be a primitive planet. And what's a primitive planet, right? You eat or be eaten. In fact, one time I read this passage about, the Apostle Paul went to this place where spirits who have been on Earth and who have resisted improving themselves will now be sent to a primitive planet. And those poor souls were told, look, you're going to go to a primitive planet. You are superior to that, but you have not shown your superiority. You've not learned, right? You've still been heavily involved in criminality and other bad acts. Therefore, you'll go to a primitive planet. Let me tell you what that means. He goes, in the planet you're going to, when a man and a woman want to marry, if there's two men that want that woman, the men fight to the death, and the loser is eaten at the wedding party. So this is the type of primitive planet you'll be going to. So, I mean, and I'm sure that's probably happened here on Earth, some tribe that we don't know about. So it just shows you, we have these instincts, like an animal instincts. We want to eat, we want to possess. And these are all the things that we have to go through life after life after life. And these primitive emotions, hate, anger, envy, selfishness, they all actually work pretty well as a lower state animal, that when we had to survive amongst all the other animals and as a beginning primitive human, that enabled us to survive. But now, as we go higher and higher in the spiritual plane, we have to withdraw these primitive emotions. We have to get rid of them, and we have to replace them with love, charity, fraternity. And when we become that state, we probably wouldn't survive very long in a primitive, because we'd be nice, say, no, you have food. And then, of course, they would, we would starve to death. But that's not the way we are. We are going to rise up more and more and more. And therefore, we have to mold our character, mold our personality. This whole material universe we're really in schools and colleges for us to go from primitive, a primitive logical personality and character to a more complicated, intricate, compassionate, loving, personality and character, which will take our life as an immortal spirit. And at one point in time, we will actually contribute to the spirit world. We may, contribute and help spirits on campuses like the Earth, or maybe primitive planets, other planets. So Leon Denis has actually, moved the amount of knowledge from the Spirit's book to what he wrote in the Plurality, and Here and Hereafter, in his chapter 11, the Plurality of Lives. He is telling us in his knowledge, and he was a medium. He felt many things that we go through this state. Now, he's not saying it as the completely truth. He's just trying to show you that's what he thinks. Again, that's what I think. And have I seen that in complete black and white from a medium? May exist, but I think it's more what I've seen is brought from what I can interpret and interpolate from what I've read. So he goes on. He goes, this gradual development may be marked by any attentive observer. Among domestic animals, differences of character are appreciable. In some species, certain individuals seem to be far more advanced than others, some being susceptible to affection and devotion, and moreover, possessing qualities which bring them decidedly nearer to man. One must credit them with the existence of a soul in embryonic form, since matter is incapable of love or sentiment. And we see this, I think, even you see in dogs, right? You can have one wonderful dog. You can have one great dog that just is smart and intelligent. I used to have a Sheltie that just knew everything. I could just tell it something and off it went. And it was, never ran away. It was just like the most wonderful Sheltie. Then We got another Sheltie when our first Sheltie, passed away. It was the dumbest dog ever. It would yelp, go chase after cars and all the dumb things. I mean, it was just an idiot dog. We loved it, of course, but it wasn't too bright. So yes, you see that, of even within animals. So therefore, and then one other story is our animals are the ones that are precious to us. They may follow us through life after life. And I've told this story before, but Chico Xavier was sitting next to a woman. She had a dog on her lap. And he told the woman, do you know how old that dog is? And she goes, well, yes, it's 3 years old. He goes, no, that dog's been with you for more than 500 years. It's been with you in life after life. So pets come back. So pets, well, as I've talked before, as family groups stay together, pets will attach themselves to you. And you will know that if you find this pet that it's just, you have this immediate connection and that pet has immediate connection to you, it's probably been with you in past lives. I know that when we got our dog, actually we bought our dog in Rio in Brazil, and my wife and my daughter and I were with the dog. First dog was Nevi, still alive. And then when we brought it to the United States, it was like Nevi was my son's dog. It was like, no, it was my son. It was just like, it was love at first sight for those two. And, you would thought Nevi would have bonded with us. And of course, she's a great Canadian Shepherd, but it was like, there was no doubt about it. When my son talked, Nevi answered. It was, no matter what I said or anyone else in the family said, it was his. So I believe that Nevi has been with my son in other lives, and somehow we brought her from Brazil to the United States, where she is now. So and then who knows? And Nevi at one time, our dog, or your favorite dog, or your favorite cat, right, may eventually follow you in life after life, and then it may go into other things, and then eventually become a human or human-like on some other planet and have their free will. Again, I just want to say that's just my opinion. But I think it makes sense. It makes sense about the whole progression and how things progress from one to the other. So let me carry on with Leon Denis. Then he says, when the soul, having attained to the human state, has achieved its autonomy and moral responsibility and acquired the sense of duty, it has not therefore attained its final end, nor finished its evolution. Its real task, far from being achieved, is now beginning, and fresh labors await it. The struggles of the past are but a prelude to those the future holds in reserve. Its rebirths on earth and in carnal bodies will follow in constant succession. Each time it will take up again with rejuvenated organs the work of self-perfection that death has interrupted. To carry it on and progress still a little further, the soul, an eternal traveler, must then thus gravitate from sphere to sphere towards righteousness and infinite reason, ever acquiring higher rank and ever growing in science, wisdom, virtue, and love. Each of our terrestrial existences is but an episode of our immortal life. No soul in this short space of time could rid itself of all its vices and errors, of all the coarse desires that are so many vestiges of its past lives, so many proofs of its origin. So what we're saying here, and what Spiritism tells us, is the idea of how, the Catholic religion, a lot of other, evangelicals, other religions say that we have, which they reject the idea of reincarnation, and we have but one life. And if, and to say that if we do something terrible in this life, we go to hell, or we go to heaven if we've been good the whole time. But if we have sinned, Spiritism doesn't like to use the word sin. They like to use the word wrongs. But if we have sinned in these other religions, then we could be set to hell forever. Now, Spiritism says that's not fair. And we all know it does seem, when you think about in where other people have been born into, the poor families, or let's say even what's even worse, poor family, there's a lot of poor people in the world that are very honorable and wonderful. But let's talk about if you're born into a criminal family, a family that stole, cheated people, conned people, whatever, and that was to you was normal. Is that fair to think that you could, you would rise to heaven when no one would talk about anything else except robbing people and so on and so forth, or those things? It just doesn't seem fair. And that's because what Spiritism tells us is you are given life after life. Now, many of us could park ourselves. What Spiritism says, parking means we go life after life, we don't improve, and that happens. Also, when with the law of affinity, when you pass on, you could go down to the lower zone, which is around the earth, or the dark abyss, which is under, which is a type of purgatory. No spirit ever goes to what's called hell or the dark abyss or purgatory forever. There's no eternal, what the Catholics say, punishment. You are there not to be punished, but to be amongst your own kind. And if you're a criminal or a pickpocket and you're amongst your own kind, you will find that being amongst your own kind isn't that great, because everyone's trying to take advantage of you. Everyone's being mean to you. And is that the world that you want to live in? I don't think so. Eventually, what happens to these people in these lower zones and below is you decide that, there's got to be something better. And you raise your head up and you start seeing the light and you start praying, and spirits will come down and help you. And they'll come down and say, there's a chance. Do you want to keep doing this? If you want to get away from this, come to us. We'll take you to one of our little colonies. They'll have colonies in the lower zone, colonies in the dark abyss, for people to start reforming their character. So this is why to learn how to actually reform your character, so that you can, at one point in time, you can help yourself transform to the higher process, is my book, How to Live. And I would recommend that to anyone who really wants to understand the steps you need to take in order to start modifying your character and your personality to get you ready for the spirit world. Because that's what we're on here, right? It's like we're in high school, and then we go to college. We go through class after class, which is like life after life, grade after grade. And hopefully we've learned something, and we build upon that, and we learn more and more. And the better we do one class, the better our next grade will be, the better teachers, the more interesting information, etc. It will all be there for us. And your life will be a much better place. Your life will be easier. You won't go through the dramatic trials and tribulations if you don't ask for that, right? You may ask for some because of your own reason, but because karma is a process. So How to Live will start teaching you to get the foundation of placing yourself in character so you can start ascending what is necessary. And you can, of course, find that book on my website, NW Spiritism. It's on the right-hand side. You can click on Amazon.com through Kindle or paperback. So let's keep talking about life. So before I get off this, as we're talking about the process, let me show you karma, the process. So here's the process. So in our previous life, and it's covered up by my picture, but your previous life is recorded, everything, every detail. And as I said before, there's nothing hidden. Every thought, everything is not hidden. So what you did in your previous life affects your life now. And just imagine there's a school, and they look at a student for a whole year, and then what they do with everything they've learned for that whole year, they will write a completely customized curriculum for that student. In every interaction, almost, some spirits say nothing is by chance. I think almost nothing is by chance. Every interaction, whether in school or home, anywhere, friends, the friends that come into that person's life, is all planned in order for that student to learn as much as they can. That is how the spirit world analyzes us and creates a blueprint for our next life. Well, consider you are in this next life, right? You're in your current life. The results from your previous life has determined the plan, the trials and episodes of your current life. So therefore, what you are today, how you act today, how you learn today will, to a great measure, affect your future life. They will create your curriculum from where you are now and where you are after you pass away from this physical body. That's all we are. We're like in a diver's suit, right? The spirit is connected to the paraspirit, which is connected to our body. Our paraspirit surrounds our body and it goes inside our body and is in communication with all our organs and cells like an invisible suit surrounding us. So I think that's important to understand as we're going through what Leon Denis is asking. So he goes on to say that each of our terrestrial existences is but an episode of our immortal life, which I said before. So by estimating the time that mankind has required from its first appearance on Earth to arrive at its present degree of civilization, we can understand that for it to fulfill destinies and ascend from light to light until the absolute, the divine, is attained, the soul will require an unlimited stretch of time and of recurrent lives. Now, when people think about lives on the planet, they think about, okay, when did life begin? Let's talk about this for a second. And what is told to us in the books, a series of books by Andre Luis, is that the primitive human first started to have its soul put in there for free will about 40,000 years ago. And amazingly, I was looking up, okay, 40,000 years ago, what does that mean? Many, archaeologists believe that fire was invented or discovered, I should say, not invented, by primitive humans about 40,000 years ago, give or take, who knows how many thousand years. So it wasn't until that human became a free will soul, and therefore, remember, when we are spirit, we have free will, whereas an animal has its instincts, and you just go on your instincts. Some of them can be, start having that beginning formation of consciousness, but it's really the human that has free will. So we've been on for about 40,000 years. We may have been, some of us may be from other planets. We go to other planets. We could go, come back. Now, in this books and Spiritism, in fact, this as in the book I was reading today, Beyond the Veil, which I talk about in my series of 3 books, they were talking that our civilization has been brought up and down multiple times. And I talk about this in my books, Heaven and Below, Spirit and the Spirit Universe, and how the spirits guide us. Again, I take information from Reverend Jival and the spirits talk to him, plus other information from all the books by Chico Xavier, Leon Denis, Yvonne Piera, and others. So if you really want to start understanding the organization, so my book, Heaven, How to Live Inner Peace with Spiritism, tells you how to mold yourself. If you want to understand, which I believe is very important, because for me, I have to understand, okay, if this is how heaven works, heaven works. How do I fit in? If I'm on this campus called Earth, why should I want to do what I want to do, right? What's my motivation? This Heaven and Below and my second and third book will really tell you what Earth is about, what heaven is about, from the hints we have, right? I'm not saying anything more than I think what the spirits have given us is, I'm looking through a keyhole and I'm just, and what the spirits, is probably so much more, it's probably so much more fantastic. But as far as what I think we can figure out today, this will give you what how heaven's different levels, what are the power, what are the attributes of spirits, what awaits you when you're learning, what are other areas, and how you're guided and helped by spirits. So, to go back where we were 40,000 years ago. Now, I know a lot of people think the myth of Lemuria and Atlantis is just that. It's myths. Well, I've read it in books by Emmanuel, who was the guiding spirit by Chico Xavier, that yes, there was Atlantis and Lemuria. I've read it in the books by Reverend G. Bowen, also taught by other high spirits. And what they said, and these civilizations, and they haven't named other civilizations, but each book has said, and with different spiritist writer in different times, right? Reverend G. Bowen was early 1900s. Chico Xavier was middle 1900s to late. Leon. So what they've each said is these civilizations rise up. They reach a certain technological level, but their spiritual, their moral level isn't concurrent with their technological level, so they destroy these civilizations. So more than Lemuria and Atlantis have brought up and destroyed. And even, Edgar Casey, when he did his great life regressions, and he talked about people who lived in Atlantis and, 40, he said 50,000 years ago. So I'm not quite sure how to reconcile some of that, but from 50 to 25,000 years ago. So we may have been, in here, some of us, been life after life on the planet Earth for 40,000 years. Enormous amount of time. So, this is just to show you how long this process is in our minds. Now, if you divide immortality, eternity by 50,000, it's still not a very big fraction of our life. So when we're through this phase of our life, you'll be, oh, that was fast. It won't be that long. That's how you should look at your life here. And the spirits tell us all the time, your life on Earth, not that long of a time, right? It will go faster. Once you're back in the spirit world, goes, well, that was fast, right? It's just like you're gone for a moment. So, if that's any comfort to you, and also to give you more comfort, the spirits tell us that any trial you are in, at the lowest level of any episode or dramatic event, that no trial is made that you cannot be victorious out of that. So always remember that. That was told by spirits who are talking to a group of suicides, which never commit suicide. Please, you're here on Earth for a reason. When they're saying why they commit suicide, he said, look, each one of you committed suicide because you had no hope. But the trials, if you had waited a week, a month, maybe a year, the trials would have ended. So please keep that in mind. So what I'm saying here is, I believe Leon Denis, not just from his own book, but from concurrent information from many spirits, who've talked to Chico Xavier, Yvonne Pereira, spirits that talked to Reverend G. Bowen, back up what he says. And he wrote this right after Allan Kardec. He wrote this before all these other spirits talked to these other mediums who were spiritists. Although Reverend G. Bowen never said he was spiritist, he talked about spiritualism, but they didn't use the word spiritism in his books. So he goes on. And, we're talking about how many lives it takes. He goes, what could one think of a God who, while granting us but one corporeal life, should have bestowed upon us such unequal gifts? and should have allotted to mankind, whether civilized or uncivilized, possessions of such different value and so divergent a spiritual level. Were it not for the law of reincarnation, inequity would rule the world, while the influence of environment, hereditary, and educational differences have their importance, yet they do not suffice to explain these anomalies. We notice that members of the same family, of the same flesh and blood, brought up with the same ideas, differ in many ways. Frequently have good men fathered monsters. Did not Marcus Aurelius beget a Commodus? And again, are not many celebrated and admirable men of descendants of parents who are not only obscure, but morally worthless? Yes. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that point. And, we go on, and some people are geniuses, right? Some people come out 3 or 4 years old, 5 years, they're a genius. I mean, how can you explain that they come with this predilection for music or math or whatever? Is because that's the influence. They were so talented in that area that it just came out, right? It was so powerful. And that's why, and you can see all the time in families, right? You can see some children, their influence of past lives. Now, let me expound on that a bit. So in the information about reincarnation, and I actually have this in my book, The Case for Reincarnation, which talks about the whole process of reincarnation. And what the spirits have told us is that, so why are children, right? Why do we have to be children? Why can't we remember our past lives? So I'll talk about why we can't remember past lives on another vlog. But children are meant to be pliable, right? Because if you were just born and you were who you were before, and you were a pickpocket or a criminal, right? Then you would still think, oh, okay, well, I'm little, but I can still steal, right? No, you're meant to be pliable so you can be, hopefully, if you're in a good family. Some people are on trials and they're given bad families, but unfortunately for them, but they will learn eventually. Your parents will help you mold your character to be a more honest, straightforward, worthwhile person, right? That's important. And the other thing they tell us is your guardian angel, your guardian spirit will be with a child for the first 7 years all the time, right? Because we all know. And we've all seen babies, like, then they walk like where they're looking behind them and they never seem to hit that post, right? Very rarely, if not, because I believe the guardian spirit's going to like move this way. And also for information for people is that a child is not really separated from its mother until the age of 7, because the blood that the mother gave to the child is not all the way out of its system until the age of 7. That's how important a mother is to a child. Then, until they're 15, maybe 20, they say, it changes. At that age, their true personality from their previous lives, or personality, not their knowledge of their previous lives, but their personality starts coming out. And that's when you see in families, it's just as Leon Denis would say, families, you'll see, the parents have 5 kids, right? But there's one that's just, the black sheep. What usually is what's told to us in spiritist literature is that family volunteered to take a primitive spirit into their family to help try to mold them to be a better person. Sometimes they succeed and sometimes they don't succeed. Whatever happens, it's not the family's fault. They get credit for that, but the spirit world is certainly happy if a primitive spirit can be raised into a good environment and improve themselves. But sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. So that's why if family has a child that's just gone off and did whatever it wanted to, well, it's not wasted, because that child, and when they're back in the spirit world, will think upon the opportunities given to it, right? Given to him or her. And it will help them think about what they should do in their next life. There's no such thing as no second chance. There are a million chances. This is the great thing about reincarnation. For me, at my advanced age, I can dream. I can say, okay, I start planning out what I want to do in my next life. If you think you're too old to dream, you're not. You can start planning what you want to do in your next life. You can start praying and meditating. Say, oh, okay, I'd like to do this. This is the great thing about reincarnation. Because when you die, you're just losing this outside covering. You are who you are. You don't grow wings, you don't get a harp, and you don't know how to play it, right? And then you go to the level, by the law of affinity, the level you should go. So, the better you are, the more you try, the more you study, the better opportunity, the nicer place you will end up as when you leave this physical body. Okay. Let's go back. So what he's saying is, if all took its rise in the present life, how could we account for so great an intellectual discrepancy, for so many degrees of vice and virtue, for so many social ranks? An impenetrable mystery would surround precocious geniuses and those powerful minds whose use assimilates science without effort, while others grow pallid with plodding to remain ungloriously mediocre all their days. This is what he says. This enigma is resolved by the doctrine of multiple lives. Those who excel by their intellect or virtue are those that have lived more, labored more, and acquired thereby greater experience and faculty. Now, there is a great part in one of the books by Chico Xavier. It was dictated to him by Emmanuel, and it's called Hell Christ. And it was set about 200 years after Jesus. It was set in the Roman Empire at the time when they were still persecuting Christians. But in it, there was a section saying there will always be managers and workers. And therefore, we have to acknowledge that, let's talk about the U.S. Constitution. It says all men are created equal. Well, first of all, we all know that it means equal under the law. But we know in our hearts that we're not created equal. I could never go play professional basketball, football, or baseball, right? I was never that talented. My eyes went out on me. I was not created equal. But spirits are created equal. All spirits have the capability to be whatever they want. It just takes dedication and study and focus and will. If you want to be a musical genius, you can ask and try to respond life after life to learn all that and become better and better and better. Although to rise, you really need to be well-rounded. But you can focus on one area at a time if that's your predilection. You're given free will. You're never forced to rise up in the spirit level. That is your decision. So when they say there's always managers and workers, what they are saying is that there are going to be people who are spiritually mature because they are at a different level in their spiritual maturity than those who are at a lower level. One day, that person at the lower level will be just as better or maybe better. Some people may rise very fast. Other people may rise slowly. Other ones may just park themselves for centuries and then rise. That's why there are people in places in charge of these less mature spirits. So I thought that was so if you want to understand, and you're looking at this poor person, and he's not very smart, and he has no, I don't know what to do with that person. And think about that, this person is probably starting out, they're not as mature as spirits as you or maybe your friends, but at one time in the future, sometime in the future lives, right? Maybe not in the future in that person's life, that person will they themselves be a manager, supervisor, leader of a great country, a religious leader, a great writer, a great musician. That person too will have that capability. So that's why we have so much inequality on earth. And that's, again, also why the spirit world, and Emmanuel said in his book, On the Way to the Light, doesn't really want us Earth right now to have like a communist or socialist society where everyone has the same outcome. No, that's not the way it should work. People should be working different jobs and have different levels and different rewards. And those who don't work and those who don't discipline themselves should pay the price. And if you allow them not to pay the price of being idle, right, you are actually hurting their spiritual advancement because these are primitive spirits. And if you let them do nothing, they will do nothing. It's not like some people think, well, if you just give them this opportunity, they'll grab it. No, you would grab it because you are a superior spirit to those people at this point in time. But they will not grab it because they actually feel comfortable at whatever level they can exist without doing anything. That is the unfortunate truth. At some time in the future, that will change when we have non-corruptible people. We have spirits who are good. We don't have primitive spirits. And when we become a planet of regeneration, that can change. But right now, these type of governments really are not fit for our present society because any type of government we have, we'll always have politicians who will be corrupt and will destroy it, right? That's why the least amount of government with the most disciplined people is the best. So, and then Leon Denis actually backs me up in what I was saying. The soul's progress and ennoblement depends wholly upon the amount of work and energy which it expends in the battle of life. Some souls courageously encounter and rapidly surmount the barriers that separate them from the higher life, while the effortless and sterile existences led by others keep them stationary for centuries. But these inequalities, the cause of which lies in the past, may be readjusted and smoothed away in future lives. So he said it much better than I. He goes on to say, man, we repeat, is his own artisan. He makes himself by gradually developing the forces that are in him. Vacillating at the start, his life gradually becomes more intelligent and purposeful as he attains manhood and enters into complete possession of himself. His freedom, however, still remains subject to the natural laws that ensure his preservation. Thus do fate and free will balance and correct one another. Freedom, hence responsibility, are ever proportionate to the soul's progress. And let me talk about that one. So, when I'm telling you, you probably look at me and you say, well, our lives are predestined. We don't really have freedom. And they even say that in the books, and it's I kind of laugh when I read this, and they say, well, don't mistake predestined, don't think you're predestined, you still have freedom. But your freedom is what your freedom is your freedom is your attitude and your character and your ability to learn from the trials that have been predestined to you. So don't be passive, be active in these trials. Now, in one of the magazines by Allan Kardec, they talked to the spirit Diogenes. And Diogenes is now on a higher plane, a higher planet of existence. And Diogenes said, look, you on earth, you're slaves. And of course, Diogenes is like that senior in college is talking to a junior in high school saying, this is tough. You don't know anything. But he's telling us the truth. He says, you're slaves. And so what he meant by that is that, yes, in one essence, we go through predetermined trials and tribulations that are set for us because we're not good enough, are smart enough, and mature enough to create our own curriculum correctly, right? Some point in the future, as we go to a planet of regeneration, to the next level, the happy planet, whatsoever, when we become into a human form or human-like form, we will have much more freedom to set what we want to study and what we want to do. We won't have this completely guided existence where every little, where the accidents happen to us, it was planned, right? Who we married, who we divorced, who was mean to us, who robbed us, those were all planned for the most part. Our life will be much more dictated by ourselves because just like you let your teenager, when they start demonstrating some sort of personal discipline and you start trusting him and credibility, so will the spirit world start trusting us when we become more mature. So I hope that helps into the knowledge of the plurality of lives. And Leon Denis is just so intelligent and wonderful that I can't say enough about him. And I reckon, and the great thing about his work is you can get it on PDF if you please. Otherwise, you can look him up on Amazon. Leon Denis, Leondenis, and he has a lot of interesting things to say. Of course, I will. I want to make sure that everyone knows that the first book, if that fits you. Now, I've talked to some people, and I understand that sometimes for some people the spirit book isn't their cup of tea, but I would recommend that you try to look at it. If not, what I have done, and if you go to my website, nwspiritism.com, and you look on the right-hand side, you will see, first you'll see a picture of I'm going to go this way, of Allan Kardec. You can click on him to go to the EDICI bookstore. You can find all of his books by Chico Xavier and others, Yvonne Piera. You can order them from there. You can order from Amazon.com. You can go to other spiritist sites and find books by Divaldo Franco. Wonderful books. I recommend you start with that. But if you are, that's not your cup of tea, you want more of how things, to give you more of a narrative and so on and so forth, I would recommend, my book, The Seven Tenets of Spiritism, which, of course, as I said before, is right now on audiobook. And it's a narrative. I interspace a narrative with how I found Spiritism and how I found the signs and signals, how it led me to Spiritism, how it affects my life. And I go through what, how spirits guide us, etc., and what it means. And then I also recommend, if you want to improve yourself, is my book, How to Live. And then, of course, my other books, Heaven and Below. So I would, these, I think I would start off with the spirit books. But if you want to read a little bit different, you can certainly read my books. I have a book all about the problem as a solution, as far as the problems you are now, or what may have caused them in previous lives. Of course, I talked about reincarnation. I have my book, The Case for Reincarnation. And then in my book, Explore Your Destiny, it's all about the different parts of the spirit world. So, and if you're into near-death experiences, I have 2 books on that, and I would recommend, The Spirit World Talks to Us. I analyze near-death experiences, and I analyze what was told, why the spirit world did what they did to that particular person, and where they went, who they talked to, and what they went through. So I want to say, everyone, thank you for joining me today on July 17th, 2019. If you're interested in talking more and you want to talk about Spiritism and you want to learn about Spiritism, I recommend you go to the site spiritismstudy.org. I've already talked to quite a few people now, and they go to the site, they scroll down, they hit on get an appointment, and they get an appointment with me or Sergio, or maybe right now there's other people there. We talk about Spiritism, we talk about what you want to talk. I don't say you got to study this. I don't do any of that, or you have to buy this, or no, it's your questions. People will come in and say, I don't know if I believe that. I say, well, yeah. And that's what Spiritism wants you to do. They want you to prove it to yourself. I don't want anybody to listen to me and say, well, whatever he says is right. No, you figure it out. It's your job to be disciplined in this life, to look at the sources you want to look at, talk to the people you want to talk, gather what you think is logical and rational to you. That's the important thing. So I'd be happy to get an appointment with people at spiritismstudy.org. It's just, to me, it's just been like the greatest pleasure of my life talking to people. I love it. And I just want to encourage it more. So I want to say, God bless everyone. God, and I want to say everyone, good chance on your spiritual discovery. and on the rest of your life. So God bless everyone. Please remember, we are going to be here every Wednesday at 7 o'clock Eastern time, all time zones around the world. Please share this video. If you're on, I'm going to put this on YouTube. Go to my site, go subscribe, click the bell on YouTube, or subscribe on BitChute. I'm putting all my videos on BitChute also, because you can't really trust YouTube anymore, unfortunately. So please share the video, give it a like. It helps the algorithm, helps people search for us, so other people too can discover Spiritism. They can discover why they are here on Earth. God bless everyone. Good night.